Hello and welcome to another episode of Pictures Without Pictures. Today we are discussing The Breakfast Club, although it was a bit of a discovery for me. Reese is here. How are you, Reese?
Oh, I'm here. I'm good.
Good. We are talking through the medium of the internet, which is not something that existed. Well, it kind of existed, but not publicly at the time of this movie being made. Along with a lot of other things. Because this movie came out in 1985. And holy heck, is it retro. It's extremely 80s and I love it. Do you remember where you were the first time you saw this film a few weeks ago? Spoilers.
Literally in the room that I'm in right now.
Such a good question for me to ask. I thought, I'll ask that question and it'll be really funny. It'll start the podcast off on a hilarious note. Yeah, so this is on Netflix right now. I feel like I should always mention where it's available to watch in case people haven't seen it and they're gonna. I mean, first of all, it's kind of a bad way to experience a movie is to hear us talk about it and to then go and watch it because you've already heard about everything that we have to say. But maybe at this point they stop the podcast and go, go watch it.
Yeah, this would be like, if you haven't seen it, go and watch it because it is fantastic film.
Yeah,
easily one of my favourite films.
Yeah, Reese messaged me and he was like, so I just watched a movie called The Breakfast Club and you have to see it.
Yeah, pretty much.
I didn't know anything about this movie going into it. I didn't watch any trailers. Literally, just before I pressed play, I saw the blurb, and it basically said it was about five kids at school, like stereotypical different types of kids at school, unraveling the fucking
social norms.
That's the one. Unraveling the social norms of school and society and all that kind of stuff. And even then, I was like, so this is like a character study, or is this more like we're about to fucking go into some weird mystical shit? I don't even know. But pretty much like 20 minutes into the film, I knew where it was going, and it's really fucking interesting. Like, even though it sounds pretty, the premise sounds pretty standard, just like it hooked me quite quickly. It's just these kids in detention who don't want to be there. And they're fucking talking, first up they're like acting out and they're like they're all different and you're learning about who they are, and then they end up talking to each other and they start talking about shit like life and shit. And I think the way this movie opens really sets the tone immediately with that quote from David Bowie. Is it from a song he's done, or is it just a poem he's written? Or David Bowie's an actor, right?
I think
this is how bad I am with pop culture. I'm sorry.
David Bowie's a singer.
That's the one.
It's just I know he was acting, but he's primarily a singer.
Because I know he did acting, but I was like, wait, he's a singer, right? But he's done acting and stuff.
He's a singer. He's a singer. He did stuff like oh god, I'm trying to remember some of his songs. I remember some of them being really weird named, but he's done all sorts of music.
So I'm guessing that's from one of his songs.
Iconic, basically.
And he's children that
big icon. He died a few years ago.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, and the quote's from one of his songs then. And these children that you spit on as they try to change their worlds are immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through. And I was kind of reminded, not just through that quote, but through the rest of the movie, of even though this all takes place in 1985, where society is very much a different place, and it's also an American film, but like I was thinking, this isn't just before smartphones and the internet. This is also before. I'm pretty sure it's before the widespread usage of mobile phones in general, and also video games. It's like such a different world, and yet a lot of similarities to some of the stuff we went through in school. Some of the characters we met, and some of the teacher types we met.
That's the point as well. And that's the thing, like social norms, the world will change around you, but social norms stay very similar through a long time. And then when they do change, it's pretty drastic, or it's because of some sort of crazy event that's taken place, like the one we're living through right now. I think it is very much a film of its time, but also it can be easily just. It could be. You could say like it's from, like, a year ago, and it's not, apart from obviously the differences, and obviously it's obviously a very old film and everything, and certain little nuance bits, but you could literally just put it into a modern setting, and it would be the exact same film.
Yeah. Exactly. It would be interesting to have this remade. I'm not saying it should be.
Yes.
But if it was remade, it would be interesting to see what the differences would be. Like, first of all, they'd all be sat grumpily on their smartphones. And I don't think necessarily forcing them to sit in a room on a Saturday would be as much of a punishment. It would be. But now that they have their smartphones and stuff, if you took their smartphones off them, it would be a punishment. But if you left them with them, they would probably just sit there and be on their smartphones. Although I'm sure there would still be conversations and stuff going on. But yeah, no, it's super interesting how times have changed, but they've also not changed at all.
Yeah, times have changed, but people haven't.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say something and I've immediately forgotten what it was, which is a great podcasting ability that I've just uncovered right now.
Pretty standard. Just uncovered.
Yeah, yeah. I'm new to this whole business. I've never failed to remember a sentence during a podcast in my life. I don't know why you would even actually bring that up. I'm looking at this picture I've got on the screen, by the way, the one I found for this, because there was nothing on Wallpaper Engine, and it's a nice graphic, but I think it's also a bit at odds with what the movie is, because the art style is very minimalist, and that makes it modern, and this movie isn't modern at all. I tried to find some kind of more... I couldn't even find a frickin' screenshot of just like them from the movie. For some reason, it's super hard to find a decent wallpaper at the right resolution. And was like, I've made a decent wallpaper and it's 1600 times 1480 for some fucking reason. I'm like, why? Why are you doing this to me right now? But yeah, so the movie opens, and you get these flashes of what they've done wrong, like. Well, to be honest, that's what I took it to be when I was first watching it, but I'm not so sure now, because they discussed.
What do you mean, like when they're being introduced right at the
beginning?
Or...
Yeah. There's like this. First of all, you hear the essay that was written at the end of the movie. You hear that being delivered.
Yeah.
Which is basically just an ultimatum. Well, not an ultimatum because there's not any demands, but like basically saying, "Hey, you're a shithead." Like, you made us this way, kind of a thing. But also like it's cutting between all of these like acts of vandalism in the school and stuff, and I assume that's just what the five of them did, but we learn what most of them did as it goes on, and I'm not sure that entirely lines up with what they did really, but yeah.
I think it's more a case of it's just showing like
rebellion.
I guess general sort of life and rebellion, and obviously you get that big shot of Bender's locker as well.
Yeah. And I really liked when all of the cars pulled up and you saw the characters getting with cars, because firstly it's a really good way of establishing what their home life is like, because it's the very small interaction you actually see of them with their parents. Most of it's told to us throughout the movie, but this is the small part of it that's shown, and it kind of acts to show you that they're telling the truth about their home life, because you've kind of seen a little example of it. But
that's
also just those cars, dude. Like, that's one of the things that really sticks out to me when you watch old movies. Like, one of the things that really like punches you in the gut of how old the movie is the cars. Like, those are some old ass cars, and I loved it.
Well, it's technology, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cars are effectively technology. So, and that's probably the biggest thing you're going to see that's changed over the years is cars.
Yeah.
Because it's a blatant thing. It's very obvious and big. It's not exactly something. And we've had cars for almost 100 years, I want to say.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Something like that. So like, and you can imagine like how many iterations that we would have gone through over the time, and because they are so big and such a massive part of people's lives, probably back then as well, it's very blatant when you see watching an older film and it's like, oh yeah, this is an old film because of the cars, because they're there. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And then again, you've got all the kids walking into the hall in different ways as well, into their prison. By the way, another thing that shows how this movie is aged is how the teacher treats the kids, and obviously some of it is like across the line even for back then, but some of it isn't, and it's like, imagine literally locking kids in a school. That would be so far across the line these days. Like, holy shit.
Sure.
And I doubt you're allowed to bring them
coming in on a weekend as well.
Yeah. As punishment, I don't think you can do that. Are you even allowed to keep them behind after school anymore? I know that was a thing when we were in school, but
yeah, that's the point. Yeah.
But again, it's kind of like forcing them to stay there past their own time. I don't know if that's still a thing or not. You know, you're getting old when you're like, I don't know what's going on in schools these days.
Yeah.
I say
it's
old.
Been a while.
We're mid-20s, but you know, it's been like 10 years. Yeah, almost.
Old enough.
Yeah. But yeah. So one thing I noticed was when Bender walked in, and he had his sunglasses on his face, and he's just wiping his hand across the desk, and he's like, I know that like what he's actually doing is just like, oh, I don't care about any of this, and he's like pushing stuff over and like touching stuff. But the image I kind of got immediately was like of a blind man, like the way that they feel through touch to see where they're going. And I don't know if that was like a subtle nod to say that like, I did write down that I would come back to this thought at the end of a movie when I knew more about the character, but at the time I was like, I don't know if this is deliberate and it's just making him out to be someone who hasn't necessarily got the best perspective on reality, by showing him as kind of a blind dude. But yeah, his sunglasses kind of come up later in the movie again, just as like, never like in the foreground, but like as a background thing. I think someone picks them up and takes them to him later and all this kind of stuff. All these characters have like their respective items that are important to them, but yeah, that was just something I noticed. I don't know if you thought that was a fucking cinema thing. Just fucking rambling here. I don't know, dude. I don't know what's going on, dude. Okay. But yeah. Did you ever get into detention in school much at all?
What the fuck? What is happening?
What's wrong?
Okay. My Audacity keeps crashing, so I'm not sure, and I think my Discord as well, so I don't know if I can...
Oh.
Sorry, things are issues.
That's alright.
I don't know if you can hear me half the time, so...
I can hear you, although...
I'll just keep an eye on Discord, because I think that's been a bit wobbly. Alright.
Should I change our server? That's what I'll do. I'll change our server. Hang on a second.
I don't know, I think my internet's just being shit at the moment, honestly.
Edit channel? I don't even remember where to do this. Welcome to the... Do. We need some like elevator music, like do.
What it's saying? It's saying it's fine. Oh no, there it goes. Yep.
All right, I'll change our server.
Massive. My ping just fucking dropped.
We need to get out of Europe. Let's go to what's the closest place to Europe?
My ping keeps going from 20 to 400.
Alright.
So, I think it might be my internet. My internet's been funky lately.
Let's go to Russia
after this. It should be alright for this.
Alright. We're now going through Russia. Can you hear me? How are we doing?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone.
I'll go reset after we're done.
Okay. So yeah, I was wondering, because I was like, he's not really responding to a lot of what I'm saying. I wonder if something's going on.
Yeah, I'm having issues. Seems alright now though. Okay.
Alright, so yeah, I like how they all come in and they're different. I was saying, did you get into detention much in school?
Probably a couple times, but it was the tip, like, if one person's doing it and then the whole group does. But I think, yeah, I a couple of times, like, by myself, I think I did, but not majorly like that.
I got into detention sometimes for talking too much. That was my main thing. I never got into detention for anything too serious.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, I definitely have some experience of being in detention and not wanting to be there and being very grumpy, and everyone's just sat with their arms crossed frowning, and the teacher's like, shut up whenever anyone talks.
Yeah.
Also, I'm not sure I ever had a teacher as explicitly awful as I remember his first name is Richard, so they call him Dick. I don't remember what his last name is, but I don't
Richard
think
Vernon, I think.
Yeah, but I definitely got the impression that some of our teachers had maybe similar views to Mr. Vernon, of like, kids get worse every year, and oh god, they're gonna be like the next generation, and it keeps me up at night and that kind of thing, and just having no faith in the kids at all. I've definitely heard that rhetoric a lot back at school.
It's a very condescending view on kids in general, and
Yes.
it immediately goes back to that David Bowie quote of basically like, you're not understanding what these kids want. You're just being like, well, they're being shit because they're shit. It's like, no. There's obviously nuance and reason behind it. They are people.
Yes.
They're young people, but they're still people. They have feelings, they have dreams, they have ambitions, they have issues.
Yeah, looking at these characters, it's so obvious to anyone that they are so like incomplete, if you know what I mean. Like they have all of these things going on in their heads, which like it just feels like they need buffing out, if you know what I mean. I'm not saying like I'm a complete person. Nobody's complete really, but like it seems like they definitely have a lot of learning and growing to do, and they're in an environment which is stifling that. In this school, which is presented as a very bland, dull, grey place, in stark contrast to their fairly colourful clothes, and everything they bring, and their styles, which I think is very, very well done indeed. But yeah, like I definitely remember hearing some rhetoric from teachers of like, oh, you don't even like know, like I don't know. It's a larger conversation, but this whole idea of teenagers, their emotions not really mattering as much, or like it's not real, but it totally is.
Like you don't understand what you're talking about. Kind of thing.
Exactly. Especially when you're talking about your own feelings, and I just want to go back in time. And
that's one of the things. If you think, it's one of the things. Well, if you think back to like your own experiences with school and stuff as well, the teachers that you most likely would have liked would have been teachers that talk to you like a fucking person.
Yes, absolutely.
Not the ones that are like talking at you, but talking to you and actually engaging in conversation rather than that. I mean, that's one of the things. That's one of the major things I noticed going from year 11 to sixth form, was the outward approach from teachers was a lot more like equal, rather than I am the teacher, you are the student. It was more a case of, you are a person learning here and I am here to help you do that. It was a lot more mature,
absolutely,
which was interesting.
I think it's interesting, because I don't necessarily know how the American schooling system works, let alone how it worked. What is this, 35 years ago? I could do easy maths. Yes, easy maths.
Yeah, 35 years.
But like I think these kids are pretty much A-level age, right? Which is some of your most formative years, or at least when it comes to who you're going to end up being as an adult, when it comes to like your emotional state and like your beliefs and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's interesting that like in this movie they don't learn shit from a teacher, they learn it from each other, especially at the end of the movie when they finally sit down and start being honest with each other about what they're going through and all this kind of stuff, which I thought was really cool to see. But man, at the start of this movie, it's just a lot of them bumping up against each other. You know, how many times is "fuck you" screamed in this film?
So many times.
Where someone points at someone
so
and screams,
many times.
"Fuck you!" I think that was probably cool and edgy in the 80s, but it came off super tacky.
Also, just, I mean, it's not used that often as well, but they do say a slur as well, which obviously at the time would have been pretty common to say. But nowadays is very much a derogatory term.
If you want to get into
if
that
we
a bit,
do, we can do. I was just going to say, I feel like it's probably a good idea to have some sort of disclaimer before we start going into that stuff. Just to say, like, anything we do say about this will be purely like in talking about it. We do not obviously think this way or would use these words in such a manner. And also, obviously, some of the shit does get pretty heavy, like later on in the film. So we'll talk about abuse and other things that may attain to that. So
yes, exactly.
Shitty subject matters are covered in this film that obviously some people might find a bit.
But I don't think any of us are strangers to having homophobic slurs thrown at you in school, as like a
we're from an age where that was still a thing.
I think it is still a thing, sadly.
It probably is, I'm sure it is, but it doesn't seem as rampant, I would say, because we're in a time now where there are a lot more people being a lot more accepting, and people are more advocating for it, and people are being more open with that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
for sure, in secondary school, if someone called you gay, it was the worst thing you could be called. Like,
Yeah, because it's like
yeah,
because like the whole idea of being called gay is so wrapped up in like masculinity as well, and
yes,
you had to
for
be
sure. It's a toxic masculinity thing. That's all it is.
and when you're in school, it's this whole pecking order of like if you look or act weak, then you get bullied, and therefore if you like masculinity is gauged as strength, and if you're being called gay, then you're not masculine, then you're weak. It's like this whole bullshit ass pecking order thing, which I think is probably still around today, even like if they don't believe in it, like you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, there's still a level of like subterfuge there. It's always going to be there. It's like there's always going to be some level of hostility with that kind of stuff, or there's always going to be, as you said, some sort of pecking order. It's just a case of obviously with times changing, obviously ideals change. What is considered to be right and wrong will also change. So,
but I was just gonna say I thought it was interesting that of all the characters, Bender seemed to be the only one who wasn't afraid of being labelled as gay. Like he kind of leaned into it, and I don't think that necessarily means he is gay. It's just like
I think it was more specifically to get a rise out of Andrew.
Yeah.
I think it was specifically that because he knew his type.
exactly
Because that's the entire Bender's entire character is he understands them all. He knows what they're like. Obviously, that changes by the end of the movie, but he knows what they're like. He's seen their type before. Because the assumption is he's been there a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Like the way he just casually wanders in and sits down. Like he has a spot that he sits, you know. And
He seems a little bit
gets
older
Brian to
as
move out
well.
the way.
And
Yeah,
if
yeah,
I
for
remember
sure.
right, there is a system in America where if you fail a year, you can be held back a year, right? And you have to do it again.
Yeah,
So
I think it's you like flunk the year or something.
I guess there's the insinuation that happened to him, and that might be why he's more experienced as well as pissed off, besides everything else he's got going on.
Yeah.
And why he's so familiar with the teacher as well. So I thought that was interesting. But I just thought, like, as a side note, it was interesting that the one character who very much was the ideal of someone who is outside the box was a character who wasn't afraid of being called gay, even if it was just to get a rise out of someone.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I've gone over that note already. I noticed when the nerd guy is talking about, like, he's muttering to himself because he's
Right.
thinking about the essay. He's going, "Who do I think I am?" He then like takes off his jacket at the exact same time as Bender, and like Bender shoots him a look like
Bender's like staring at him.
Yeah.
Good lord.
But like
The beginning of that.
I think the whole thing where he's going, "Who do I think I am?" and then he immediately copies who he considers to be the coolest person in the room is very telling of that character in general.
Yeah,
I
for
thought that
sure.
was cool. This movie is just
Like,
full
'cause-
to the brim of cool little character moments like that.
It is like, and that expands for them a lot of the film as well. Like he like talks to him at certain points, and he's like being like, oh yeah, like he's obviously trying to be like buddy with him, which I think is really interesting and definitely is a tell of that character.
Yeah, definitely something I never did at school. I mean, come on, being unpopular and nerdy, and then you know, a more popular looking kid gives you a shred of niceness, and then suddenly you're buddy with them. I definitely didn't do that. I don't know what you're talking about. That was year 7. It's fine. I got over that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the whole thing. When you're watching this movie, you're just constantly referring back to your own experiences with school.
Yeah, I think that's basically what's wanted as well. Like, this film is. I think this film is specifically for either people that are in like this sort of time in their life, or for parents that have kids in
Yes.
this sort of time of their life. You know,
To be like, hey,
or
look,
like of getting up to that.
yeah.
Like, hey, like they are people. Please take care of them.
And I think it's super interesting that this was filmed in the 80s, and these people would be the adults by now. And
Oh yeah.
we've seen many people of that generation doing the same thing that the adults in this movie are doing right now.
Yeah.
And the whole
It's so odd, like it baffles me that this is such a big film as well. I mean, it's iconic. I mean, the scene at the shot at the end is an iconic thing. It's spoofed in so many things.
Yeah. That's what I should have used for the background.
Come on, there you go. That okay.
I was going to say that's
Yeah,
what I should have used.
that's
for
what I
the
thought you were gonna use. Yeah.
background. I should
That's
have.
also
I didn't think of
gonna
it.
use, yeah.
God,
Audacity is struggling.
I know what you mean.
Oh,
don't worry about Audacity.
I completely lost my thought because Audacity is freaking out. But you got the idea.
we were talking about how they're the adults now.
Yes. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say it is baffling, like, because it's from a time where, like, it would have been like, I would say, probably like, maybe not my parents, because my parents were quite young when they had me, but like generally speaking, like our generations of sort of parents would have been like roughly the time they
Yeah.
probably would have watched it. You know, it roughly would have been that generation.
And when you,
And
sorry, go on.
I remember going through school, and I do see a fair amount of people's parents still being this really like restricted, like
Yep,
completely like what these parents were portrayed as.
exactly.
It's horrible.
And
So to still see that like such a iconic movie is message is just kind of like disappeared almost.
and you would think these guys' parents would have grown up around the '60s, and the '60s is very well known for its movement of, change and like getting away from like the adults of the world and being different and adding color to the world and
I
being
mean, the
free
60s
about who
would
you
have
are.
been not. I mean, 60s would have been not too long after the war as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and so it's like it's this constant cycle of like we as millennials like to think that we're a very liberal kind of group of people, or I guess not group of people, but
Yeah.
like generation of people. But it will
Yeah.
always happen if we don't look out for it. Like you already see it happening of these people like, oh, I fucking hate Fortnite. And, like
It's-
all these kids dancing, it's so cringe and all this kind of stuff. It's like no,
yeah,
they're just expressing
That's-
themselves.
that's-
We're
we're
already doing this.
you're just doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like the old quote that I always like to say: if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Hell yeah.
And it's a fantastic quote. I can't remember who says it. I can't remember something. But it's a fantastic quote because it does perfectly describe the human condition.
Exactly, yeah. And they even say it in
like, and that is a perfect example of what you just said.
they say it in his film as well, like, oh my god, are we going to become our parents? And like that's
Yeah.
towards the end of the film.
I love that. That line is fantastic.
I know,
Because it's pretty much it's what it builds up to that point, but we're not there yet. So let's not. Talk
No, we're
about
not
it
yet. No. We can't talk about a film non-linearly. That would be too crazy, and that would be too off the rails for Pages Without Pictures. Come on, Reese. I don't know why you
Back on
suggested
topic.
it. I was gonna say when I was watching this kind of intro, I was reminded of how important school felt during school. Especially like this kid who we learn later is so stressed out about his grades. It's like extremely
Yeah.
affecting his mental health. And you
Yes,
look
for
back
sure.
at school now, and it's like, yeah, it's important for those grades help you get jobs and stuff. But besides that, it doesn't really mean as much as they want you to think that it means.
Yep. And that's the thing that resonated with me when he has that whole part talking about that. I was like, "Fuck, dude!" Like
Yeah.
I was having a moment because that was me. That was me at one
Yep.
point in my life. But with everything hitting me all at once, like everything was bad at that time in my life, and so I was like, "I need to do this," and then everything fell apart around, and it's very sort of like, oh, okay, I understand this angle of it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like, God, they just stress these kids out so much. It's like I understand wanting them to get good grades and everything, but it's just adults just generally in general, especially during this era, and especially during the era we grew up in. I don't know what it's like now, but they did not respect the mental health of teenagers at all. It was just they're just assholes, and I think there's this duality in the film of what these kids learn from the adult versus what they learn from each other. And what they learn from each other is so much more important because that's like they learn who they are and what their issues are and what other issues other people have and how to interact with each other. And that's almost more important than schoolwork, or it's definitely more important than schoolwork. And that's what they
Yeah.
don't teach you at school. That's just what you learn at school by being around other people your age and making mistakes and fucking
Yeah.
up.
Exactly.
I think it's beautiful that there's a film like this to really illustrate that.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, my next note was teenagers are so horrible to each other. That much hasn't changed in 30 years or 35 years.
Well, it's more a case of like not knowing how to act with each other.
Yeah,
You don't really know what the appropriate thing to say is at that kind of time in your life, do you? Like you just say
Well,
something and hope it sticks.
well, no,
like
but
what
also-
you think is right.
I'm referring to when like I think Bender like at some point he pretty much like identifies someone's insecurities and like digs right down into them to insult them because
Yeah.
they upset him.
He does
And-
that a lot.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
And It's weird. He's like a pseudo antagonist. Like he's not an antagonist. Like the teacher's the antagonist, and like he kind of. I don't know. There's a whole argument for like, does he really grow and learn during this film? Like you get the impression that he does at the end of it, but when you think about what actually happens, I think the other characters learned a bit more than he did.
I think, I think his reactions and stuff and things are kind of do say that a lot. Like for his like general reactions and his and like near the end as well. I do think there is a case of he's obviously taken something away from this as much as they have, because I think the original intention is for him to be like, like wake up to these problems you clearly have, because they're gonna fuck you up later on, basically. But then that was his intention of being like, hey, this, and then but then they were like, well, this, and he was like, oh shit, actually, yeah. So I think it was definitely a case of like him doing that in his weird twisted way, but then him getting something from it as well was very much like, oh, all right, I guess this is a thing.
Yeah, I guess so.
But I just love he challenges everything. When someone says something, he challenges it immediately, and
especially
you can definitely tell like these decisions that they've been making or doing, like they've never been fully challenged on these things they've been doing. And adults don't like it because he's a kid. And in our eyes, he's a kid, so he doesn't know shit. Whereas these kids, obviously these kids that are with him, they see him as like, obviously he's been around the block, and he may be what like these teachers are saying, like, because the initial like the way he's portrayed is he's the reject, he's the outcast, he's a criminal. And so these kids basically react to him the same way the teacher does. Literally the exact way. But then they start talking, obviously that develops. And so I think it is very much a case of they end up looking up to him to some degree, some more than others, obviously some for different reasons. And I think it's kind of intention. That's definitely his intention to begin with, but I think that does change to the movie for sure.
Especially you look at the scene where he's getting himself into more and more detention. It's like he can't stop himself, and like obviously at the end of the scene he's like fuck kind of thing after the teacher walks out, but he can't he legitimately cannot bring himself to like not constantly bite back. And I kind of respected him for that as well, because the teacher was being an asshole.
It's like the whole like it's like the whole thing of being like not accepting things as they are, always asking why. Which is a fantastic way to be, for sure. And maybe less so in this context, but like I think that's the general idea he gives off, for sure.
Well, I think it's the whole point is like the teacher's trying to like stifle his voice by threatening him with detention, and he's just refusing because like, well, why should I be silent and just accept what you're fucking telling me? Like, you're clearly an asshole. I don't know. Another thing I wanted to bring up was I get the impression that this movie must have influenced Matt Groening, or at least someone who helped make The Simpsons and Futurama a lot, because obviously Bender, probably named after Bender, and also Eat My Shorts is in this film, and that's before The Simpsons really existed.
Eat My Shorts, yeah.
So
sure,
I think this was probably an influence on Groening.
Oh,
I like that.
Definitely.
I like making intertextual links like that, of just being like, oh shit. Especially when that happened. But yeah. Notes. I'm really good. What I'm really good at doing is hiding the fact that I'm looking at my notes. That's the best part of this podcast. It's when I just stop and go, hang on a minute, let me get my notes.
Anyway, I'm going to read for a moment.
Oh, you know when I forgot to bring up the cast of characters, I apologise. But the quiet girl at the back, when she's like tying string around her finger to cut off a blood supply, I was just like, holy shit, I did that as a kid. When I was
I love that whole scene, because obviously they're just like trying to stave off the board and all like this, so they're just doing different shit, and I guarantee you literally all those things they did are stuff that people have done or still do. Like even the whole like lighting his shoe on fire thing, I'm pretty sure like I've seen kids in school doing that, like when we were at school.
I know someone who lit their pen on fire and tried to smoke it. That was an interesting lesson. But kids just like, like when you're trying to fucking pound a square peg into a round hole, it's like it's not always healthy. Like there's probably some kids that school's good for, but I think the majority of them, the system definitely is way too rigid, and it really fucks with them. Like, not just through boredom,
It's
obviously, but for other ways.
But we keep comparing it to modern times as well. But this is what I hate, and I realized because I went through a whole back and forth of like, obviously, trying to understand why we wanted to go on to do, and one of my things was like be a teacher, and then it was some other stuff, and blah blah blah. But I think what my initial thought on the teacher stuff is because I fucking hate the education system.
Yeah.
The education system is a fucking joke because, and it's one of the things I always say because I'm happy saying I failed a good portion of my lessons and stuff in sixth form for personal reasons and all that shit. But I can say with certain clarity, I didn't fail. The system failed me because I was clearly at a detriment in a really bad way, and nothing was done to help me in that situation.
Hi, we went to the same school. Can confirm this is what happened.
But that's what I mean. Like, there's a level of like, because going back to what I said about the whole like maturity thing of like you're suddenly treated with a bit more respect and stuff when you hit sixth form. Because like, okay, you're an adult now. You're doing this serious stuff to go on to do what inevitably will be your careers in life. But then it seems like there's less pushback. There's less care.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's very, very much a case of like, here's the work you gotta do, bye.
Yeah.
And whereas obviously in school there is like that sort of caring sort of like, okay, you're struggling with this, okay, I'll help you with that, blah 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 blah. And then it just feels like there's just a wall blocking you off from all that, and it feels like you can't physically go talk to someone about the stuff. And if you do, which I did by the way, then you get a half-assed response.
Yeah.
So
And
basically it feels like there's not enough people that care in these situations.
Absolutely.
There are people that do care, for sure. I mean, people.
oh yeah.
People become teachers and do all these things for good reasons. I'm sure people do, but some people do it and they don't fucking care, and that is so damaging.
Yeah, we should.
Just for like the experience of. Sorry, I'm going off, but
That's
I will
alright.
finish. But it's so damaging for the people there, the students and everything, and just the things you're trying to teach as well, because you could be teaching something like art, for example, and because of the way you're not caring about this, whether it's a subject with the kids or whatever, it ruins everything. And it may ruin that. Say this kid was really interested in art, you've ruined their vision of art now, so they will never want to do that anymore.
Hi, that's me.
That's something completely been ruined.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like as a person,
sorry.
I would have got really into art and music if I had the right teachers. But yeah, I was going to echo
That's
what
I
you
mean.
said.
I'm the same way.
I was going to echo what you said and say that we should have a disclaimer that we're aware that there are plenty of really good and awesome teachers out there who are doing amazing things, and we thank you for all of your hard work.
That's for
But
sure.
we've had some really negative experiences with teachers that echo what we've seen in this film, and it's part of the reason why we're even covering it. So that's why we're going to be talking a lot about that kind of stuff today.
This is one of the reasons why I brought this up as well, because it brings up very strong feelings about our own experiences. Because why we not necessarily had the worst experiences, we definitely felt like, you know, something was definitely wrong, or something, you know,
Yeah.
there was definitely a bad experience there, whether it was with how certain things were treated, or simply how you were treated by other students, or like it just does feel like there is something inherently missing that should be there.
Yeah.
Whether I'm the person or Christian is the person to say what, but maybe not entirely sure.
No.
But I honestly think it's just a lack of caring, personally.
Yeah.
And someone caring for you or just asking how you are goes a fucking long way.
Exactly.
Especially when you're a kid and you're confused about what your future's gonna be.
Yeah, I also went through some shit in A-levels like halfway through, and you just felt so like it was the teenagers and then a wall and then the adults, you know? It's like, it didn't feel like necessarily... I didn't necessarily like need them to come and save me from myself, but I was very much... There was no kind of resources for me to go to of like, holy shit, I am struggling with my brain right now, you know? Like, we technically had a school counsellor, but like...
We did for about one term, and then she left, and it was like, well, that was helpful.
Yeah, and it felt like the school was very much had this kind of conservative idea of what like teenagers should feel, and like what their feelings are worth versus effort in education and all of this kind of stuff. So yeah, we have both had some
because
bad experiences.
Effort does not equal talent.
Exactly.
Which is something that is always seems to be the problem for sure. I love saying little adages here and there, but I'm going to say another one now. It's like testing a fish's ability to climb a tree. Yes. Obviously, it's not going to be able to climb a fucking tree.
Exactly. But it's the best goddamn swimmer you've ever fucking seen.
Exactly, and that's my point. And this, I watched a thing not too long ago, where it was the idea that certain subjects were heavily discouraged to the point where people that would have excelled in those subjects and gone on to do great things are completely stifled and shut out of doing those things. I think it was specifically art was brought up, and the idea was that everyone, as a kid, everyone has such a massively creative brain. It's just a natural thing you do as a kid when you're quite young. But because of how the education system works, a lot of it is stamped out of you very quickly, apart from the people that obviously latch onto it and are very passionate about it. But if the education system was different, there'd be a lot more artists and people like willing to enjoy that kind of thing.
I can think of 2 examples from my personal time at school. Firstly, when we were approaching year 9 and we were choosing our GCSEs even, there was this whole element of there were certain lessons you had to choose between because they would happen at the same time, and I get that there's administrative limitations and all this kind of stuff, but it was very much like, if you have 2 topics you love but they're occurring at the same time, too bad, you don't get to pursue a GCSE in one of them.
For sure.
And I think for me, one of those was, I was kind of interested in pursuing drama, but it would have clashed with something else that I liked just a little bit more, so I never did. And then
it's the same with me for music.
A second example, which might be a little bit similar, was during A-levels, my school were like, yeah, there's not enough of you taking history. I think I was the only person who took history in our year. So we're not going to do it here. You're going to have to bus over to another school to do it. And that's fine, we'll provide the bus. Except a year later, we're going to get rid of a bus for money reasons, and you're going to have to apply for a bursary in order to get the bus fare to go to your other school. Oh, hang on a minute, we're lowering the bursary this term because there's less money for you this time. It's like such a constant avalanche of bullshit.
Some of this stuff stems back to government issues, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's not all purely education is built through the government. So the problems with the educational system do stem back to that. But man, I obviously I had very similar experiences in A-levels as well. Of I was the only person in our school that did physics, so I always had to go to another school all the time. But because of that, I didn't have anyone that I could easily get in contact with. To be someone I knew, like a teacher I knew, or I knew could help, or because I enjoyed the sciences, so I was decently friendly with a lot of the science teachers in our school, apart from a couple.
I would regularly have the history teachers be like, hey Christian, how's it going over there, making sure they're taking care of
that's what I mean
kind of stuff.
But that's what I mean, and because me and you are very anxious people, especially now.
What are you talking about?
We wouldn't have but we wouldn't have gone up and been like, I need help with this, to a teacher we barely know. While you're in a different school full of students that all know each other, and you're the outlier. It's horrible.
I was lucky in that
a horrible experience.
I was quite lucky in that I fell in with kind of a friend group in the other school of people who these quite cool people who were quite different to the people that we knew at our school, but definitely it could have gone a completely different way. And the teachers as well, it's I just didn't have access to talk to them until I was actually over there twice a week or whatever.
That's what I mean, it's such it was so limiting everything, so it wasn't, no wonder I fucking failed. Technically I did pass, it was just a low grade, and that was purely through me trying to self-teach stuff that I had never been taught before as well, which is another fault of the fucking education system, because for some reason, I don't know if it was because of school ability or because of how they did the subjects or something, but our school only did about 4 of the science modules you're supposed to do in each one, whereas all the others had done 6. So we were 2 entire modules behind when we went to start chemistry and physics and stuff, which is fucking atrocious. Trying to get through that was a nightmare.
While we're talking about school in general as well, I think it's important to acknowledge that very recently a whole bunch of bullshit happened with people's grades. It happened recently. Was it A-level or GCSE? It was A-level, right?
I think it was GCSE. It was GCSE. It might have been both. I remember specifically hearing about GCSE. because it was based on postcodes or some shit.
Yeah, right.
Like, it was something really fucking arbitrary. Like, it made zero sense.
I would go with Insidious.
Yeah.
Enforcing classism. And if anyone gets on at me about this podcast being too political, I hate to tell you, but pretty much everything ties back to politics, because politics tie back to how the world works and how our lives are lived.
Unfortunately.
So, there's that.
You're rich. Socialism now.
There's definitely an element of being too political.
Sorry. My left was showing there, sorry.
I mean, I agree with the polite gentleman across from me virtually, but there's definitely elements of being too political about things. But I just want to mention, like, I want to share an experience where I had where basically we walked in on results day and my teacher ran up to me and was like, Christian, before you open your results, I just want you to know they've all come back severely undermarked. And this was for English. And
I remember this.
I got a U in
remember
English.
hearing about this.
And it was not a U paper, it was a B paper. And so we obviously sent it back, and they came back and I got a D. I was like, are we sure that's right? And we're pretty sure the reason why that happened is because if they marked it up too far, it would show their own ineptitude and how far that they failed for students from their actual grades.
That is something that's fundamentally wrong with this world.
Yeah.
No one likes to take responsibility for their mistakes.
Exactly.
They would much rather ruin someone's future than accept a mistake, which is what is fundamentally wrong with people.
And, you know, I still did fine. But
I'm laughing, but I am so angry with that kind of thing.
I did fine, but this I could have done without that added stress on top of everything else I was going through at the time.
Oh,
so,
for sure.
Sure.
It's like, because that's basically telling you didn't do well enough to get this grade, when you did, except people are stupid.
And what employer's going to listen to, I know that my CV says this, but there was a whole fuck up with the grades and everything. No employer's going to listen to that. Like, shut up.
No, because they'll see someone who actually has that grade and go for them. That's how that works.
Yeah.
Like,
we should probably get
they
back
will
to
see which one is
the
better letter, and then we'll go to that. But God, that was. It wasn't a tangent. It was related.
Yeah, that's what this movie's all about. Like, maybe not necessarily that grade thing specifically, but definitely for one of the characters, like how he's stressed out about grades because they tried to put a square peg into a round hole again, and he wasn't very good at shop. I remember being like, I'm pretty sure that was our version of tech. I remember sucking at tech. It was like my least favorite lesson. I ditched that shit as soon as I could for GCSE.
Same.
But where you couldn't get the light bulb to light up, which I've just realised is a metaphor for not being able to get. A light bulb is symbolic of an idea, and you can get the right things going on in his brain to get that done. But it's like, man, like the system like pushing you to get the highest grades and everything possible when there's naturally going to be some things you're better at than other things. And clearly this
he says specifically he took it because he thought it would be an easy pass so he could get his average up very easily.
Yeah, and this poor kid was so like some element, like his parents, his school, a combination of the two, the wider world, was pushing him to get higher grades so much that like they didn't care about the signs of him being too stressed. They were like, you can almost imagine the conservative outlook of a bit of stress is healthy for a learning lad. You know, it motivates him to and
healthy consideration of suicide's all good. It's what a growing boy needs. It's like, all right.
Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting how each one of these characters not only symbolized a stereotype that you typically see going through school, but also like some of the issues that a lot of kids have that aren't necessarily, definitely back then, weren't openly talked about. Like, we're watching this movie in the modern day where, to be fair, there is more discussion about mental health than there has been in the past. When this came out, like, I don't think that would have been the case.
Ahead of its time.
Yeah,
this is massively ahead of its time. I mean, it talks about domestic abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, suicide, sexuality as well is another one.
Very important.
Like not just like in terms of his okayness with being called gay and stuff, but obviously with Claire's like sexuality stuff that they go into.
Yeah, it's like the nerdy kid is obviously very self-conscious about being a virgin, but so's Claire, and that's hidden slightly more, but like it's just as important. And then it comes out more later in the film as well. And then you've got the quiet girl at the back who's like a compulsive liar and all of this. Yeah. So to lighten the mood, one part of the movie which really made me laugh was when so we're going a little bit ahead here, I guess, but at this point he's really wound the teacher up, and they've been running through the corridors, which by the way was an extremely 80s sequence which I loved, where they all skid across the floor and they're running back again.
He'll slide around the corner and he's right there like
and then the asshole of the group turns out to be self-sacrificial and was like, I'll lead him away kind of a thing, and I'll get in trouble because I'm used to getting in trouble. And then when the teacher like brings her back into the room and they're all kind of like laughing. No, he's hidden, isn't he? He's hidden under the desk and they're all trying not to give away.
No. That's after he gets like locked up.
Okay. Well, the teacher says, "You think he's bitching? Is that it?" That made me laugh.
Yeah.
And you get the impression that this teacher's kind of insecure too.
Yeah, I mean, well, you do, because like the moment he pulls him out and puts him in the cupboard, he's like, "Oh, I don't want you to disrespect me in front of them kids like that again." Like, and so it's obviously like, oh shit, so he's got issues.
Yeah,
like,
he's scared of losing his authority. And
exactly.
And I gotta say, even now, as like an adult, there's an element of like you don't want to get caught out by like a teenager laughing at you, not because you care about what they think, but like there's just something primal about don't like put yourself in a position of power above
should
me.
Be better.
Like, exactly. Whether that's right or not.
Be
like,
in this situation.
Yeah,
for sure.
But God, yeah. And then when he locks him in the cupboard and like he's literally like threatening him, that's such a horrifying scene.
That's such a good scene, though.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so perfect because it perfectly encapsulates Bender's true character, like of who he is, and obviously the teacher's like where he's at his wit's end and like he thinks that he's just doing it just to piss him off, and he just goes on about, once you're out of here, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, and it's like, whoa, okay.
And he's like, we'll see where you are in 5 years and all this kind of shit.
I think one of the fantastic things about the guy who plays Bender as well is his facial acting is fantastic in this film, because he perfectly conveys like toiling emotions, and then like his general like upset and fear and his anger and like his like playfulness. Like he perfectly captures everything so well in the character without barely saying anything.
Yeah, he does. Like, doesn't he say like nothing during that scene? But like his body language.
He says nothing through that entire thing. Yeah, but he's like physically recoils at one point. Like when he starts doing it, he's like, holy shit.
He's like legitimately.
And then he climbs throughout the roof and then makes the whole joke.
He's like legit.
I don't. Sorry, Karen.
I was gonna say he's like legitimately scared, but at the same time like just disgusted with this person, and like it's kind of like.
I honestly.
I was gonna say it kind of turns the tables, because like throughout a lot of the start of the film you're like, wow, this guy's an asshole, but then you realise that like no, it's the teacher who's the asshole. Like he shows his true colours and all this kind of stuff.
I think it's a case of like, because the comparison to Paul there is his parents and then the teachers. Obviously the way he acts out and stuff, he obviously wants to be at the school more than home for obvious reasons. I don't think we mentioned that, by the way. We should probably mention that. And like the fact that now this guy is threatening him with violence like his father does, and there's like that almost moment of like, so I'm not safe here either. Great. Like,
that's true.
Obviously him acting out and stuff is purely there so he can be there more, because there is better than home. For sure.
That's true. I think,
but that whole, sorry, go on.
It's a balance of like, he doesn't want to be at home and he doesn't want to be at school either, but school, as bad as it is still better than home.
Better than being physically abused. But so I'll just explain that. Obviously because he acts out what he thinks Brian's whole thing is. I don't. So interesting thing about that is, because obviously he does the whole bit of like his mum and his dad talking to each other, and then like fakes punching like one of them. I think it's definitely like a case of like almost like I guess a jealousy kind of thing of being like yours is so perfect, why are you complaining?
Yeah.
And then obviously he enacts his own of being like being beaten up and his mum being abused by his dad.
Yeah.
God, that's one of the scenes where he says "fuck you" a lot.
That's why he hates some of the other kids so much. Like, obviously he's
Yeah.
attracted to Claire, but part of him hates her because of how privileged her life is.
Yeah.
And then he also hates on the nerdy kid as well, not just because of his status as like being a nerdy kid, but also because he clearly has a better home life, as well as the jock.
Well, the thing he says to
or like it
the thing he
appears
says to
that
him
way
as well
initially.
is yeah. One of the things he says to Brian earlier on is "you're a parent's wet dream."
Yeah.
Obviously, because he studies, he's very academic, he does all the lessons and stuff.
Mm.
I think Brian's character is like criminally misunderstood until right at the end, which I think is fantastic.
And that's the thing as well. Is I remember this at school as well. Of like it was horrible, but it was true. Of having legitimate problems and all of this kind of stuff, but at the same time, like almost comparing yourself to others and being like, well, why are you upset? Like, how could what you're going through be any worse than what I'm going through? And it's purely through a lack of perspective because they haven't had these human conversations until these years. You see that a lot towards the end of the movie where they're finally starting to understand each other. Of like, what you're going through might be different to what I'm going through, but you're still going through it, kind of a thing.
But like that, I think that's the first point in the movie as well, where Bender physically like loses it, and obviously he runs off and sits up in the stairs.
Yeah.
Because because I think it's Andrew. He basically says, "Oh, your ball's shitting," and then he obviously shows off the sky. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not," and he's like, "Nah, fuck you guys," and runs off.
Another really important aspect of Bender's character around a similar sort of time in the movie is at the very start. Isn't it the jock who says it to him, where he's like, if you weren't here, who would even notice? Like, you're not going to amount to anything, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he just kind of reacts with like, oh yeah, shut up, asshole, kind of thing. Like, he reacts angrily. But then he brings it up much later in the movie, meaning that he held on to that, and that really hurt him, kind of a thing.
Well, it's because I think the idea is it's not the first time he's heard it, but it still hurts, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
No one would react if you disappeared, like...
But I definitely know of some cases at my time of school of like these kids who just on the surface of it seem like assholes, and then you would say something to them that you feel like they would say to someone every day, and they were like much more affected by it than you thought they would be, because they're humans too.
That's one of the things that I always say as well is I don't in recent years I've sort of made an effort to be less annoyed at people that react in like a negative way towards me. Because I mean, the first instinct is to be like, "Wow, this person's just been shitty to me for no reason. That's shit. What the fuck's wrong with this person?" And then I'm like, "Okay, what's wrong with this person?" And then like when you think about it, everyone has their own things they're dealing with. Everyone's dealing with some shit, whether it's bad or worse or no reason to compare. But everyone has their thing they're dealing with, or something that you don't know or on about that they're dealing with that you don't know what's going on. And for them to react like that, it could be like they've had a really, really bad day, and you doing something mildly inconvenient, like say you accidentally you like bump into them or something, like, oh, you fucking watched it or whatever. Like that could have been the tipping point of a really shit day or like a shit week or whatever. Like that could be fun. So, in retrospect, be kind. Like all you can do is just be like, yeah, whatever, like, and just move on. They're not. People won't be shitty. 90% of people won't be shitty for no reason.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a reason for that. I mean, it's the old adage of everything happens for a reason. Less philosophical, but
we're full of adages too.
And there is a domino effect happening.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's perfect for that. But there is obviously there's always a domino effect. There's always a cause and effect. There's always a cause and effect. There's nothing just happens. There's always a cause of that thing happening.
Yeah.
It's like in science as well. There's always a cause and effect.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think this is perfectly says that as well, because they all just saying like, oh, he's acting out. He's an asshole. He just does that. It's like, no, he is a horribly abused kid that is trying to get someone's attention.
Yeah, And as we get later in the movie as well, we realise it takes the teacher giving up and going to the basement and trying to sneak on files or whatever, and then eventually having a beer. It takes him giving up and going away for the kids to finally have room to breathe, to be themselves, and then to like learn from each other. And I like how, when Bender and Claire are talking to each other at one point, and she shows him the inside of her purse, he says, how come you got so much shit in your purse? And she says, how come you got so many girlfriends? And it's basically the same answer of like whether they're real or not. It's like he can't let go of things, and she can't let go of like physical things. And that's when they really start to realize. She says
like, I guess I can't throw these things away. And he's like, oh, there you go.
I paused it and I wrote same answer, and then I unpaused it, and she said, I guess I can't throw these things away. And I went, boom! I predicted it.
But it's I think with Bender, the idea is more like holding on to good things, I guess, because it's more of like because there's so much shit going on, you hold on to the good things. I actually watched, that reminds me, I watched this morning actually, I watched the Van Gogh episode of Doctor Who.
Oh man.
And there's a line that Matt Smith says in it, which is the good things. Sorry, was it?
Life
the
is
bad
a pile
things
of
never
good
left
things
the
and bad
good
things.
things. Yes, that's something like that. And it's like that good thing we did lessened the overall bad thing that happened, or something like that. And I was just like, holy shit! Like,
that's one of the best quotes of the entire series.
Thing. Oh, I loved that episode. It's such a good episode. I loved that episode. But yeah, I think it was fantastic the way that was said. Because it doesn't mean it will solve it, but it will lessen the blow. And I think that's kind of the same thing with Bender, in that he's obviously holding on to these, I guess, what would be relationships to some degree. Obviously, it's not really explored, but yeah, obviously it's a good thing, so he wants to hold on to it.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to shine a light on a character of the quiet girl whose name is Alison Reynolds. I finally looked it up. She, throughout the entire movie, she is like, the acting is so fucking good, of just someone who is so quiet, so isolated, like so like emotionally unhappy, and how long it takes for her to finally start to open up to someone, and then when she does, she frantically tries to undo it as they start asking questions about her. Like she says, well, no one asks what's in my purse, do you want to see? And then when they're like, no, we don't really care, and then she's like tired of people not caring, so she empties the purse. And then they start like asking her questions, and she tries to take it back. I really loved the scene when after she walked off from that, the jock dude, he went over and like he finally asked her, not in as many words, but he was like, hey, are you okay? And like, I don't think anyone had really asked her that before, and that was when she really started to open up and heal.
I love her facial acting as well, because there's a lot of points, like there's a point earlier on where they're talking about parents and stuff, and then she just loudly goes, ha! Like in the back.
It's like the first noise she makes.
And then you can see her eyes are really teary as well. It's like, and then that's like something that, then obviously I honestly think like the reason she shares with Andrew initially is because it's the same face. And she understands that he understands, so she's like, shit, this is someone who gets what I'm feeling. Maybe I should actually share the problem, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I did also like the part where she got shy and then like slammed her face on the desk. That was quite funny.
The little squeal,
like, that just goes to show that despite everything, she still has a side to her which is endearing and all this kind of stuff. And it just needs to come out. But yeah, man, there's a lot to talk about in this movie. I feel like I'm not going through it in a very linear or.
I'd say we're a little bit over halfway, I'd say.
I kind of stopped taking notes towards the second half just because I was so engrossed in like what each character was doing, especially towards the end where they're all having that big conversation about what their home lives are like and all this kind of stuff. And I think my favourite thing about that conversation is it isn't perfect. They don't come to an accord at the end of it. They don't all like agree to like, oh, I'll respect your feelings kind of stuff. It's this constant rise and fall of listening to each other and then getting angry over something and then shouting at each other and then starting to understand again, and then it's like this constant learning process.
I mean, it's rational reactions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which you'd expect from kids who don't really understand the information they're being given.
Yeah.
They're being each one of them is being given like different perspectives on something that they don't understand, like a different perspective of something that they have such a different experience in, that it's almost like they're rejecting the idea. It's like, no, it can't be that way, you know?
Yeah.
And then they think about it and it's like, I guess that makes sense. Like, it's like, why am I like this, you know? And then that's like slow understanding, which I think is fantastic. Like, it's not immediate like, I believe you. It's like I'm skeptical.
Yeah, and it shows us still this learning process of like, they still need to grow up and learn more about each other. It's not all just going to be done in one day. As much as they do change throughout this movie, and at the end of it, like, they're different people. It's not like 100% cooked adult at the end, you know. Like, there's still so much.
Ding.
There's still so much room for them to grow and stuff.
I think one of my favorite parts of the end sort of bit though is obviously they start ganging up on Claire, don't they? And I think it's perfect, like, sort of comparison to, like, she's normally the popular one, but everyone hates her at that one moment.
Yeah,
it's
true.
like, ooh, she's not used to this.
Yeah.
Which is why she starts like screaming, like, stop it, and like she's freaking out and stuff.
Yeah. I also liked that very frank discussion they had about, like, well, this is all very nice, but when we all see each other again on Monday and we fall into our social groups again, are we going to pretend that we're not seeing each other in the hallway, that none of this happened? Which I think, like, again, relating back to our own experiences at school, that's definitely a thing. Like, the psychology of a school year, of, like, there were definitely people who had, like, secret friendships and stuff, as shitty as it sounds.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's like,
yeah.
Like me, I can even say me. There were people who were kind to me, depending on who was in the room. And if a mate of theirs who was slightly more jockish was in the room, then suddenly they weren't very kind to me. And, you know, as a growing person, obviously I didn't realise this for the bullshit that it was. I just kind of took it as it happened. But, like,
yeah.
It's
you don't call out the bullshit, do you?
No.
Because you just think it's how things are. It's how you don't know any differently. So why would you question it?
Exactly. And, you know, it's all part of a growing process, but, like, geez, you kind of wish that we could get to a point where people just weren't shits to each other in school, don't you? And I think it is important that we definitely try to establish that, even if there is, like, a learning process, to just not be horrible to each other. Everyone's growing and all this kind of stuff. Maybe kickstart that part of a realization. But yeah. I really liked. Did you say his name was Andrew the Jock? I keep calling him the Jock.
Yeah, he's called Andrew. Yeah, I think so.
When he went on that monologue about how he bullied that kid, and it starts off as like a joke.
Yeah.
And then, like, he starts talking about it like real, because I think this is shortly after they say that they're different people when they're with different people, and he's talking about how he was remembering his dad, like, kind of impressing the idea on him of what it's like, the importance of being strong versus being weak. And so he bullied this kid, and, like, he didn't even like doing it. He just, like, felt like he should. And then, like, he got really, like, that was some really good acting. You could see that he was really fucked up about it. And
yeah.
How do you even apologize for something like that? Was, you know, was the line he said. And I've definitely seen that happen in school as well, of people who, you know, they're decent people around some people, but then, you know, depending on the situation, they feel like they need to get some social standing. It's just the whole thing, isn't it?
This being slightly different in the case of him obviously trying to be, like, impressing his dad, you know?
Yeah. Like, he wanted to get into attention to impress his dad, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Like, oh, I goofed around too, so you should, you know, like, the line that he says at the end of, like, where it's like, there are no losers in this family, and he's like, win, and he's almost like crying every time he says it. Oh,
it's very
such
similar.
a brilliant scene.
It's very similar to Bender's outburst of what his family was like. And then you can kind of see Bender
almost a
him.
carbon copy the way it's delivered. Yeah.
And
that's. Can I just say as well, that scene, like, from, like, the part where they obviously start smoking, the weed and stuff. Yeah. From there on, it's so much less about Bender, and it's more about everyone else. He's just there, and I think that's fantastic. The idea that he was there to get it started, and is now taking a step back while it just happens.
Yeah,
is brilliant.
Because
I think the way that's shot, and then he obviously pops in now, and he's when he pops in at any point at that point now, they're all on equal standing. They're all equal, and so he is part of the group rather than being the outlier. And I think that's the way that's portrayed is fantastic.
Yeah,
especially when he yells "fuck you" at Claire.
I think marijuana in this film is very much used as like the epitome of what adults don't want versus what kids do want, of just like this like ultimate rebellious thing of, well, you're always telling us not to do drugs, and now we're going to do a drug that, you know, calms us down from all of the stress you put on us. And by the way, I'll just say this out the gate, I have very uninformed and incomplete opinions on like weed in general. I definitely had some views when I was younger that now I'm reconsidering about, like I just was 100% against it, and now I'm starting to reconsider that, and I don't think I would ever do that because of just who I am as a person. I'm teetotal, like I'm away from even alcohol and stuff, but you know, like just not judging people who do it and all this kind of stuff, and there's balance to everything.
I mean, it's one of those things that people always compare is alcohol and weed. Alcohol is arguably a lot worse, yet it's legal.
Yeah.
Which is always an interesting thing to talk about when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, if some places can legalize it and it be fine, then it's probably not all that bad. When you probably you hear a lot more bad things about people drinking than you do, you know, smoking weed. So
yeah.
So I've probably had some after effects from weed living in this fucking city. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it smells.
I know exactly how. I've never smoked it, but I know exactly how weed smells.
Yeah, same. But yeah, it's this whole thing. But I can, even, you know, as uninformed and undecided as I am about the matter, I can very much analyze the film from a perspective of like, well, it's clearly like presented as a positive thing here.
Yeah, it's used as a trope rather than to be like, hey, marijuana's fine. It's more of a, no, it's specifically used as a device rather than the thing itself that's being used.
Yeah, and like I said, it's used like as a rebellious thing and a calming down thing, and it definitely ushers us into a different act in the movie. And it's interesting because
I love that. Sorry, Karen.
I was going to say, it's interesting how around the same time we also see the teacher going down and sharing a beer with the janitor, because that's almost like the adult acceptable recreation going on in a different room.
I love that scene. I do like that scene, by the way, with Carl. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because Carl perfectly describes like what we're all thinking as well, as being like, I think what is it he says? The Dick, we'll call him, because, you know, he's a
teacher.
dick.
Yeah.
He says these kids are going to take care of me when they're older, and then Carl goes, no, they're not.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like, that shuts my... That might be the last thing we hear him say in the movie, actually, because then he goes up and he reads the essay. He doesn't say
it's such a
anything
profound thing as well.
Yeah, I'm like, oh damn. Like, it's a two-way
street. I do like
street.
that quiet acceptance from him as well. I do like the quiet acceptance from him at the end as well, when he's reading the paper that Brian read.
Yeah, because it's very articulate, and I like to think that he would have read that and it would have surprised him, because it's like almost like the language of adults that he was telling them to use, but it's being used against him in a way that's like, oh shit, like the David Bowie quote again. They know what they're going through. Like, oh, okay.
Exactly. It's the way it's done as well is like he's sat in the chair and they're the one pointing the finger at him and being like, no, you listen to me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it really I imagine would really put him in perspective of everything as well, because that's what this movie is. It's perspective. That's the entire thing. Everyone's perspective is so clouded by these specific things of wanting respect, of seeing others as, you know, seeing others in as something that they're arguably not, and like thinking you understand like these people and what they're doing with their lives and how their family lives are and stuff, and the whole thing is just a jumbled mess like that slowly becomes entangled as people begin to understand more and more what everyone is dealing with, or to some degree at least being empathetic.
Exactly.
Because empathy is arguably one of the hardest things that, you know, empathy is one of the hardest things to attain, for sure. Because it is that idea of taking it upon yourself to see it through someone else's eyes and be like, well, if I was them in that situation, how would I feel? And obviously the only thing that comes from that is understanding that person to begin with. Empathy becomes easier once you understand the person that you're trying to be empathetic towards.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that they basically say that empathy is one of the hardest things to feel, because it is so hard to try and be someone else.
Yeah.
Because obviously you are you, you know.
The world could sure use a whole lot more of it, couldn't it?
Oh, for sure. But people are too busy with their money and their power and their assholery. Sometimes all three.
But it's with movies like this that hopefully we can start to change people's minds. He said about a movie that happened 35 years ago. But you know what I mean. Stories are so powerful, but and I think stories are so important in shaping empathy, developing it.
This is why I like media, because this shit you could not tell in any other vein and have the same effect. You could not tell this in another way and for it to have the same effect, for sure. The way this is done, the way it's shot, the way the characters act is fantastically done to perfectly encapsulate this really important message.
Yeah.
And it's the same with music as well, of like... they say, like, people have different appreciations for music because of certain, like, how their brain's programmed. Where some people get goosebumps when they listen to music and some people don't.
I do.
I've heard, like, they physically cannot.
Weird.
Which I think is really weird because I'm in the former category for sure. Because it's an emotional response, goosebumps.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really interesting because music is another media, like books obviously is another media because of imagination.
I think music as a media I understand the least about. Like, it just does things to me. It's just like magic. I'm like, damn, that was a good song, and I cannot tell you why. But again,
I'm trying to learn in that regard. I'm trying to learn in that regard.
I'm not sure I want to.
But
I think it's cooler as magic. Just me personally.
Yeah, fair. But I had a conversation with someone where I was talking about how I really like songs that almost like are telling a story in how they're played. And he showed me a guitar player called Steve Vai, who plays a song called... this is from the 80s, I think, actually. 80s or 90s, I can't remember. Maybe early 90s, late 80s. But he plays a song called For the Love of God, and it's like a progressive song for about 5 minutes. And it is... One, it's an amazing guitar player playing an amazing song. But two, like, it's this progressive song that is telling a story the entire time, and it's a beautiful song. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I just love that about it. And it's just like, it takes you on this journey of like, your mind can go anywhere with it as well.
It's the thing for me is like, I can understand having an emotional response to music with lyrics, but so much of what I listen to doesn't have lyrics, and it still provokes an emotional response with me. It's like,
that's what I mean. Like,
these are just sounds that an instrument's making. Like, how can that provoke an emotional... It's like magic. I just don't get it, but it's amazing and I love it.
Yeah, because it's all to do with I think it is to do with it's biology to some degree, with how your brain processes sounds and stuff. Obviously, like bassy sounds are very soothing, because obviously they're very sort of like low and very sort of soft almost sounding. And obviously higher pitched ones are used in a lot of horror stuff, so it's obviously because it's a lot higher, it's like a loud high pitched noise like screaming, for example, obviously is a very dangerous sound.
That's like an instinctual thing, I guess.
But music there's good music in this film as well, I gotta say as well. Like I think one of the things I really like is when Bender is talking about his family situation, the music slowly builds until he like does the miming of the punch, and it's just like bang, I'm like, oh shit.
Also, the first time...
build up, and then the climax of him obviously miming the punch.
I remember the first time he yells "fuck you" at the teacher as well, as the door slamming. There's a huge amount of noise going on as well, which was used to great effect. But yeah, I think we've done a podcast about this one. If there's anything else you want to say about it,
I just love to like find out like the almost like the after of being like, I hope they actually like stood by what they said and act like, I guess that's the assumption, right?
Yeah.
And like the assumption is confirmed with obviously Bender with his fist in the air, the iconic final shot of the film, which is spoofed everywhere.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, it's a fantastic film. Like it conveys so much in. It's only an hour and a half film as well.
Yeah.
It's not a long film.
It's not.
It's an hour and a half, and it's pure characters just doing cool shit, like just experiences, and it's a great movie. Yeah, honestly, it's pure 80s as well, which is always a plus for me. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting, and I do like how. I love the I think the favorite at the end as well is the Andrew's dad does a double take of the, obviously because she's been made over a little bit.
Yeah.
And like the double take, he's like, what?
Who was that? Yeah. And also the idea that
I think it's
he's like, my boy, kind of a thing. Like,
Yeah.
part of you thinks like, oh great, now he's got like something that affirms his belief as a parent of like, oh, my boy's a winner, all this kind of stuff. That's not really explored at all, but that's just something that propped up in my mind when I saw that.
I think the last shot is pretty good though. With like before obviously he walks across the field, he like before he puts the glasses on, he like looks up at the school almost like a ugh, and then puts the glasses on and walks up, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
Like he's very much like almost like smiling like outwardly towards everyone. Then he turns around, looks at the school like ugh, and then walks off. Like which I think is fantastic.
Yeah. So friend, I'm gonna level with you. I had an idea for the movie for next week, but it's not on Netflix or anywhere that we can see it, so I'm a little bit stumped. I'm trying to very quietly Google what's on Netflix at the minute. So I was gonna do Blade Runner, but sadly, sadly there's no way for it to be seen without paying for it.
Sad.
Sad. Do you have any suggestions?
Let me consult the list.
By the way, I never mentioned this on the podcast, but the list is real and it's very full.
It is a very big list.
I haven't crossed out Truman Show yet.
Yeah, it's a big boy. But yeah, do you want to watch something a bit more light-hearted?
Yes.
This time around?
I have had
watched
quite
a lot
a
of
week.
real things. And it might be nice just to watch something a bit more chill and a bit more fun.
Yeah.
The Mummy, if that's anywhere.
The Mummy.
Do you like a bit of Brendan Fraser?
I should have preferred this.
Some really interesting good stuff.
I would have prepared this before the podcast, but I got caught up in emulating PlayStation 1 games, which reminds me, I might stream again tonight and emulate some PlayStation 1 games on stream, so keep an eye on my feed. Oh, hey, I've got an idea. Maybe, not sure. Which version is this? I'm looking at Hellboy on Netflix, but I'm not sure which version it is.
It'll probably be the old ones because
it's the 2019 version that people don't like. Okay.
Oh, never mind.
Never mind then. Huh.
Oh, it doesn't look like that's annoying. Okay.
We could do something historical. How do you feel about Gladiator? I think that's on the list already.
Gladiator? We can do Gladiator.
Because I think I remember watching that in school, but that was before I really cared about history.
Oh yeah, Gladiator. Yeah.
I don't remember.
2.5 hours. Lovely.
Oh, it is a long.
Yeah, we can watch that. I could.
Yeah?
It's is it Greek or Roman?
Roman, I believe.
Yeah. Roman, Greek.
Roman.
Like old mythos, Greek and Rome, and are very similar.
They sure are, because the Romans pretty much stole a whole bunch of Greek culture.
Yep, they did. Even their gods.
Yep, they just renamed a bunch of them. Yep, okay, it's
renamed
Roman.
all of the planets.
Shall we watch Gladiator next week then?
Sure, yeah, Gladiator sounds good.
Netflix says
a bit
this
more
film
of a
is
combat-y thing rather than a think piece.
Netflix says this film is exciting. So there we go. Got an exciting film on our hands.
Says it's rousing.
Oh. I like how there's a shot of the same dude in Robin Hood, and he looks exactly the fucking same.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the same dude.
Join us.
Fucking white men. Jesus Christ.
Join us next week for some whitewashed history. No. Join us next week for Gladiator. Where we will be.
It's true.
talking about. I don't know a huge amount about Roman history, but I'll probably enjoy the film for its aesthetic, if nothing else. That's the thing. I keep going on about how much I like history, but I'm not hugely well educated in history. Just because education, if we are to go back to this stream's topic, is not always the best, and historical education in this country is extremely focused on particular eras. Usually World War II, because this country has a boner for World War II. So.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's watch Gladiator next week and reconvene and talk about muscular dudes stabbing each other with swords.
Yes.
Until then, it's goodbye from me. Just stealing people's outros now.
Better at these outros, good lord.
You're supposed to say, and it's goodbye from me, and then we play like the pointless outro theme music.
Do I also need to laugh while saying it, or?
If you want to, that's entirely your choice.
I'm calling you out, is what I'm doing, Christian.
It's not working.
Well. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you for tuning in.